I've always believed that old age is a bit like wearing a hat in strong wind. You're never sure whether it makes you look elegant or simply determined to keep it from flying off. That morning at the Savannah bus terminal, my navy blue hat was putting up a good fight. I pressed it down with one hand, while the other tugged my stubbornly heavy suitcase, heavy enough to suggest I was either running away from something or preparing for emotional archaeology. 78 feels like a perfectly respectable age to stop pretending you have a plan. People call it wisdom, but honestly, it's just freedom. No one expects you to be efficient or mysterious anymore, so when you are, it causes delightful confusion. I stood on the platform with my face tilted toward the warm March sun and whispered to myself, "This is just a trip, Margaret, nothing dramatic. You're simply doing what you should have done back then." Back then was 50 years in the rearview mirror, and we referred to me and a man named Thomas McCrae, my first love, my first heartbreak, my first big lesson in emotional gravity. We were young, in love, and running on the dangerous belief that passion alone could carry the weight of two imperfect humans. It didn't. One morning, Thomas simply vanished. No note, no apology, not even a postcard with a palm tree to soften the blow. That exit was so clean, so sudden, it felt like he'd been practicing disappearing long before he met me. And no, I haven't forgiven him. Forgiveness is for people who forget, and I have a memory that clings like burrs on hiking socks. The bus hissed and exhaled, pulling me back to the present. "Ma'am, need help with that?" the young driver asked, already reaching for my suitcase. "No," I said. "I've carried this thing as long as I've carried my grudges. I can manage." He laughed the way only someone with very little life experience laughs, lightly, easily, unaware that laughter gets heavier with age. I climbed aboard, found my seat, and pulled from my purse a sun-faded photograph. Me and Thomas, standing on Tybee Island Beach, our feet buried in hot sand, our eyes squinting at the future as if it were something bright and unavoidable. We were supposed to spend our honeymoon there. Instead, we spent the next decades pretending we were strangers on opposite ends of the planet. Going back now was my odd way of closing a circle, maybe even opening a window. I wasn't sure which metaphor fit, but both sounded moderately hopeful. The hotel we'd chosen in our youth was a cheap, damp little place with suspicious stains on the ceiling and a mattress that squeaked like it was confessing sins. Now it had a glamorous name, Tidal Whisper Inn, and an even more glamorous price. In America, nostalgia ages like wine. The older it gets, the more costly it becomes to sip. And yet, despite the rising sense of, "Margaret, this may be a mistake," a strange thought nagged me. What if he's there? Ridiculous, of course. People like Thomas don't just reappear. They float through life like rumors. But even rumors have addresses sometimes. The bus rolled on. I rested my head against the window and let the road hum under me. Insert from the narrator, third person. The bus followed the coastline, steady as a heartbeat. Margaret McLean sat with her hands folded over her purse, looking outward but thinking inward. She believed she was traveling alone toward the past. She did not know the past had already arrived ahead of her. In the lobby of the Tidal Whisper Inn, written in clean, dark ink, was a name she had not spoken aloud in 50 years. Thomas McCrae. Checked in the day before. Stepping off the bus, I felt the coastal air slap me across the face with the familiarity of an old friend who never learned boundaries. Salt, sun, and a hint of fried shrimp from somewhere nearby. If heaven smells like anything, it's probably that. The inn stood polished and smug, like a former classmate who'd married rich. A young man at the front desk greeted me with the exact smile hospitality schools must teach. Warm, neutral, and slightly terrified of complaints. "Welcome to the Tidal Whisper Inn, Miss McLean. Room 214, Ocean View." "I know. The ocean's been there longer than any of us." He blinked, unsure if that counted as humor. As he reached for the key card, he hesitated and glanced at the open registration book. This is probably nothing, but would you, by any chance, be traveling with someone? No, dear. If I had company, he'd be the one carrying the suitcase. It's just, he pointed discreetly, another guest with your original reservation date checked in yesterday, a Mr. I raised my hand. If you say it, I might combust on the spot. He closed his mouth, wisely, but I looked anyway. Thomas McCrae, room 108. I pressed my palm against the counter to steady myself. The desk felt cool and indifferent, a nice contrast to the sudden warmth in my chest. Not romantic warmth, mind you, but the kind you feel right before an electrical fire. Well, I said, clearing my throat, life certainly has a sense of humor, a badly timed one. Should I do something? The clerk asked. Yes, I said, you should pretend you never showed me that. He nodded so fast, he nearly sprained his neck. I took my keycard and headed toward the elevator, walking a little too straight as if my skeleton had briefly become militarized. Inside the elevator, alone at last, I allowed myself one whispered sentence. You've got to be kidding me. The doors slid shut. The room smelled faintly of lavender and ocean air, a scent clearly calibrated to relax guests into spending money. I placed my suitcase on the bed and sat beside it, breathing in the view from the window. The water shimmered like someone had sprinkled diamonds over blue silk. The beach looked exactly as it had decades ago, which I found both comforting and rude. I tried to tell myself this was fine. I came here for closure, not confrontation. Thomas's presence didn't change the goal. If anything, it made the plot more interesting, in a stressful, heartburn-inducing sort of way. Still, curiosity tugged at me like a persistent child. Was he alone? Why now? And what exactly was I supposed to do? Knock on his door? Pretend I hadn't noticed? Stage a dramatic slow-motion encounter in the lobby like a discount soap opera? I wasn't ready. Not yet. Instead, I unpacked, made tea, and opened the balcony door. The ocean rushed in to greet me loud and shameless. A few gulls argued overhead. Somewhere below, a couple laughed too loudly for this early in the season. The world carried on, refusing to pause for my personal drama. Good for it! Just when I began to relax, the phone in my room rang. No one had that number. I stared at it for 5 seconds before answering. Hello? A silence so long I almost hung up. Then a voice, low, older, roughened by time, but unmistakably familiar. Margaret, is that you? My throat tightened. Thomas, you have some nerve. He exhaled a laugh that wasn't quite a laugh. I saw your name on the guest list. I didn't think you'd come. That makes 2 of us. Another pause. Thick, complicated, the kind you can trip over. I'd like to talk, he said, whenever you're willing. I could have said no. I could have hung up. I could have told him 50 years were too many for a conversation. Instead, I said, not today, and not in the way you think. A soft exhale. I'll wait. You always did, I replied, right until the moment you didn't. I hung up before he could respond. My heart thumped like it had dusted off its old tap shoes. Well, I said into the empty room, this trip just got unnecessarily interesting. I walked back to the balcony, rested my hands on the railing, and let the wind tangle my hair. The ocean roared with the same relentless energy it had when I was 28. Funny how nature doesn't bother aging gracefully. Below me, a man walked slowly along the sand, hands in pockets, shoulders slightly stooped. I squinted. Maybe the light was tricking me. Maybe memory was reaching for connection where none existed. But the walk, the posture, the tilt of the head, it was him. Only older, only real, only here. And suddenly, I felt that dangerous teenage flutter deep inside my ribcage, the one I thought had retired decades ago.
I didn't wave. I didn't call out. I didn't even move. I just watched. He stopped, turned slightly, looked up toward my balcony. I stepped back like a startled cat. Maybe he saw me. Maybe he hadn't. Either way, the past wasn't done with me. It never had been. If my life were a movie, this would be the start of the swelling soundtrack. Strings, maybe, or a lonely piano. But reality prefers awkward silence and the hum of an old air conditioner. And somewhere between the gulls, the waves, and my heartbeat, I realized something rare and terrifying. This wasn't just a trip. This was a beginning. A messy, overdue, beautifully inconvenient beginning.
I've always said mornings are untrustworthy. They promise serenity, clarity, a clean slate, then promptly ruin everything with unexpected phone calls, memory flashbacks, or, in my current case, the sight of a familiar man lurking near the coffee machine. But I'm getting ahead of myself. I woke up before sunrise, which I consider a personal moral failing, but the ocean was already wide awake, roaring with the enthusiasm of a toddler on sugar. I made tea, sat on the bed, and told myself sternly, "You are not thinking about Thomas today. Today is for you." My reflection in the hotel mirror nodded in solemn agreement before immediately disobeying. The face staring back was lined, intelligent, and exhausted in a glamorous way, like a movie star who had seen too much but still remembered her mark on the stage. I sighed. Margaret, get dressed before your brain starts narrating your day like a documentary. I slipped into a sundress, put on the traitorous navy blue hat, and ventured downstairs in search of breakfast and emotional neutrality. The dining room was bright, open, and decorated like someone had Googled coastal chic and purchased everything on the first page. Seagrass chairs, driftwood accents, muted blues, tranquil everything. I half expected a meditation instructor to pop out and offer breathing exercises. I grabbed a plate, chose scrambled eggs that were suspiciously perfect, and spotted an empty table by the window. Then I spotted him. Thomas, standing by the self-serve coffee station as if he owned the concept of caffeine. Same posture as yesterday, same slightly tilted head, same maddening calm. He hadn't seen me yet. I could have run. I could have hidden behind a decorative palm. I briefly considered diving into the cereal display. Instead, I walked to my table, sat down, and pretended I wasn't vibrating internally like a phone on silent mode. I cut into my eggs, chewed, swallowed, and looked anywhere but at him. But fate is a nosy neighbor, and it taps loudly. "Margaret." His voice slid across the room and wrapped around my spine like a cold hand. I slowly raised my head. There he was. Older, undeniably, his hair now silver, lines carved deeply along cheeks and forehead. But his eyes, those complicated, gentle, infuriating eyes, were exactly the same. "Good morning," he said. I nodded once. "Is it?" A flicker of amusement passed through him. "I hope so. May I?" "No," I replied automatically. He took the rejection with a grace that irritated me further. "I'll sit anyway," he said softly, "unless you decide to throw your eggs at me." I stiffened. "I would never waste food like that. I'm Southern." He sat across from me with careful slowness, as if approaching a frightened animal capable of biting. I folded my hands. "You have 2 minutes. After that, the world will remember I'm old and shouldn't be bothered before breakfast." He breathed in, steady and calm. "I didn't know you'd come, truly. When I saw your name in the book—" "You called me," I interrupted.
which was inappropriate. Fair enough, he murmured. But seeing your name after 50 years? 48, I corrected. Let's not round up the suffering. He looked down, almost smiling. All right, 48. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The room around us hummed with casual seaside chatter. Tourists discussing sunscreen, children begging for extra muffins, the clink of glasses, life being annoyingly normal. Then he said it. I'm sorry. I blinked. That was it? The apology I'd waited half a century for, delivered without ceremony, like returning an overdue library book? You're sorry, I repeated, about the disappearing. Yes. Or the phone call last night? He hesitated. Both. I stared at him, trying to read the truth on his face. Age had changed him, sure, but guilt ages a person differently. It softens them, hollows them out, leaves echoes behind the eyes. He looked like a man carrying echoes. You have some nerve showing up here, I finally said. I didn't show up because of you, he replied gently, but I'm glad you're here. That statement was a minefield, a field made entirely of mines, accompanied by a cheerful sign that read, Welcome. Why are you here, Thomas? He opened his mouth, closed it, and instead asked, Would you walk with me today? Just walk, nothing heavy. I laughed, short and sharp. Heavy is your specialty. Still, I'd like to talk, but only if you do.
I used to believe the desert didn't change people. It just bleached them a little, faded them like old denim until their true colors came through. The sun is too honest for secrets. But somewhere in the weeks after that accidental hug with Leo, yes, accidental, don't smirk, I began to notice something shifting around me. Not in a dramatic Hollywood way. Nobody cued dramatic music or slow-motion sandstorms. But the air changed, or I changed. Usually one arrives with the other. For starters, Sunhaven's staff suddenly remembered I existed. I'm not sure whether that was because I started walking around smiling like a woman who had discovered a new flavor of yogurt, or because Leo kept dropping by my table during meals, tapping the back of my chair in that casual way men use when they're trying to look like they're not flirting. His hand would brush my shoulder, warm and steady, like he was checking the weather of me. And I won't lie, I let him. It had been a long time since anyone wanted to know how my day was. Even longer since a man cared about the answer. But before you start picturing some desert romance, stop right there. Things were complicated. I still had a marriage, even if it was a marriage in hospice. And Leo, well, Leo was a man carved by sun and silence, with a past that smelled faintly of gasoline and regret. You don't rush into something like that just because your heart gets jumpy when he raises an eyebrow. The first thing that really changed was the weather. Now, a rational person would say that monsoon season simply arrived early and I'm anthropomorphizing meteorology like a woman who listens to too many guided meditations. But let me paint the scene. One Thursday afternoon, grumpy, sun-baked, the kind of day when lizards seem to sigh, I was sitting on my patio drinking iced coffee. Leo knocked on the rail. "You busy?" he asked, which was a funny question to ask someone who retired from busy years ago. "Terribly," I said. "I'm in the middle of arguing with myself about whether I should reorganize the pantry or succumb to existential dread." He grinned. "Want to walk instead?" Now, the sensible answer would have been no. Walking in the Arizona summer is like volunteering to bake yourself alive, and I'm a woman built for sweaters, not solar exposure. But his smile was the kind that made you feel 16 and irresponsible again. So we walked. Sunhaven has a little trail behind the complex. Desert scrub and reddish rocks, nothing special. Except it becomes special when someone walks next to you like you're a destination. We were halfway down the path when the air changed. Heavy, electric, swollen with something dramatic. "Incoming," he murmured, looking at the sky. I looked too. Clouds stacked on the horizon, dark and theatrical, like a movie that hadn't finished buffering. "You bring storms?" I teased. His mouth twitched. "Used to." I didn't know what that meant, but before I could ask, the sky cracked open with one of those enormous theatrical monsoon drops, big as coins, hot as bathwater. Within seconds, I was drenched, my blouse glued to me like an unflattering audition costume. "Oh, wonderful," I said. "I've always wanted to resemble a disappointed seal." He laughed, and it was the sound of a man who rarely gets to. Then he grabbed my hand. No hesitation, no apology. And we ran. I don't run. I wobble fast. But Leo ran with such ease that he practically pulled me across the trail like a kite with opinions. By the time we reached the covered walkway, we were both soaked, breathing hard, laughing like two idiots with nothing left to lose. I leaned against the wall, trying to catch my breath. He leaned beside me, rain dripping from his hair. "You okay?" he asked. "Yes," I said. "But if I die, know that my funeral should include refreshments. People forget that part." He gave that soft, low laugh again. For a moment, we just stood there, the rain pounding like applause around us. His hand was still holding mine, and I didn't pull away. Not because I was swept up in some romance, but because my fingers felt alive, and that scared me more than the storm. Later that evening, I found myself pacing my room, towel wrapped around my hair like some oversized croissant. I kept replaying the moment his thumb brushed my knuckles. I shouldn't have liked it. I really shouldn't have. Henry, my husband, may have begun slipping away years ago, but vows are stubborn creatures. They linger.
like perfume on a scarf. I am not a woman who cheats. But here's the trouble. There's a thin, uncomfortable space between loyalty and loneliness, and I'd been living in it for a long time. So I did the sensible thing. I tried to avoid him. And that lasted not long. Sunhaven organizes a weekly movie night, which is adorable if you enjoy watching classics projected on a wrinkled bedsheet that makes every actor look like they're melting. But I go anyway, mostly for the popcorn and the excuse to complain about something trivial. That Friday, I found a seat in the back row, hoping to blend into the upholstery. But when the lights dimmed, someone sat beside me. I didn't need to look to know it was Leo. His cologne, subtle, warm, faintly woody, had already colonized the chair. "You avoiding me?" he asked softly. I stiffened. "Of course not. I'm simply practicing social distancing emotionally." "Meaning?" "I'm complicated," I whispered, staring at the grainy screen where Cary Grant was being charming at low resolution. "So am I." That surprised me. Leo never admitted anything personal. He was a human fortress, the kind you assume has a tragic backstory but refuses to monologue. I turned slightly. "Why did you come to Sunhaven?" He watched the screen, not me. "Needed a place where nobody knew me." "From what?" I asked. He didn't answer at first. He just exhaled, slow and heavy. "I used to be a mechanic. Ran a garage with my brother. Good business, good town, good everything." A pause. Then one day I walked home and found a note on the counter. My wife had left. Took half of everything. Took my kid too. My heart stuttered. "I'm sorry." "Don't be. It was a long time ago. But it broke something. I stopped trusting people. Stopped trusting myself." The screen flickered. Cary Grant dipped into a shadow. Rain pattered faintly outside. "That's why I don't get close to people," Leo said softly. "And yet here you are," I murmured. He turned then, and his eyes met mine. The room was dark, but I could see something warm in them, something not meant for casual acquaintances. "Edith, I like being around you." Oh dear. My internal organs did a sort of synchronized panicked shimmy. I swallowed. "I like being around you too. But you're married," he finished quietly. "Yes." "Is he here at Sunhaven?" "No. He's, elsewhere. Medical care."
People think gossip dies once you reach a certain age, as if wrinkles act like social dampeners. They are terribly wrong. Gossip among seniors is not merely alive, it thrives, multiplies, mutates, and eventually achieves a kind of biological autonomy. It's a desert organism all on its own, resilient, sharp, and usually wearing orthopedic sandals. So it was only a matter of time until Sunhaven discovered that Edith Harlow had been seen walking around in the rain holding a man's hand. It started, predictably, with Marjorie Finch. Marjorie is 82, weighs as much as a determined breeze, and has the moral flexibility of a crow stealing shiny objects. She also has binocular vision sharp enough to read my dental fillings from across the cafeteria. On Sunday morning, she appeared beside my breakfast table like something summoned by saying her name 3 times. "Edith," she said, drawing out the vowels as if she were announcing a scandal on national television. "I hear you were frolicking in weather with Leo Ramirez." Frolicking? The woman made it sound like we were performing a mating ritual in a nature documentary. "I don't frolic," I said. "I walk, sometimes briskly. And sometimes while holding hands." I nearly inhaled my oatmeal. "Who told you that?" "Your posture," she said, tapping the air. "Women only straighten their backs like that when they're guilty or when they finally found a bra that fits." I sighed. "It was rain. We ran for shelter. That's it." She leaned forward like a vulture closing in on a plot twist. "Are you saying there's nothing between you and Leo?" "I am saying that my personal life is none of your concern." Which in Sunhaven translates directly to, "Please continue spreading this information as widely and creatively as you can." Marjorie gave a tiny, satisfied nod. "Well, if you ever need advice, I've dated more men than this community has cacti." I opened my mouth to ask if that was something to brag about, but she'd already drifted away, probably to alert the other desert owls. I stared at my oatmeal, which now seemed to accuse me of scandalous behavior. The worst part? I wasn't sure I wasn't behaving scandalously. Because despite the storm, despite the visit to Henry, despite telling Leo we'd go slow, I wanted to see him again. And I did see him. Too soon, too close. He found me later that morning in the garden where I was aggressively pruning a rosemary bush as if it owed me money. He approached in that calm, steady way he has, like wind moving across a dune. "Morning," he said. "Morning," I replied, aware that my voice sounded like I'd swallowed a cactus. "Marjorie given you trouble?" he asked, nodding toward the cafeteria. "She accused me of frolicking." He chuckled, but that made her whole week. "It made something. A mess, mostly. People talk. They always talk. We can't control that. Still, the last thing I want is anyone thinking I'm betraying Henry." He went quiet for a moment, looking at the horizon where the desert met the sky in a shimmering blur. "Being alive isn't betrayal," he said gently. "Words like that make you feel seen in a way that's both comforting and terrifying. So, how was your visit?" he asked. I told him. Not everything, not the small cracking inside my chest when Henry opened his eyes, but enough. He listened without interrupting, nodding occasionally, his expression soft. When I finished, he said, "You were brave." "No," I said, "just overdue." "You can be both." That startled a laugh out of me. "You always talk like you were raised by Zen monks." "No monks,
he shrugged. Just life. I looked at him then. Really looked at him. There was something new in the way his shoulders sat, relaxed but expectant. Something hopeful. Something dangerous. I said, Leo, I don't want to rush anything. You're not. Walking slow is still walking. He stepped closer. Not touching me. He never touched first, but close enough that I felt the warmth radiating off him like a low-banked fire. You hungry? Always. Lunch on the patio. Neutral ground. No frolicking allowed. The word frolicking was beginning to haunt me. Still, I said yes. Lunch was harmless. Mostly. We sat outside at one of Sunhaven's little shaded tables, the kind that wobbles if someone even thinks about leaning on it. I ordered chicken salad. He ordered a burger because men his age think cholesterol is a myth invented by women. We talked about harmless topics, the heat, the garden, the staff's obsession with labeling everything. But the moments in between the topics, those weren't harmless at all. Sometimes we'd both speak at the same time and laugh. Sometimes I'd look up and catch him watching me with the softness that felt like a hand brushing my cheek. Sometimes a breeze would lift my hair and he'd glance at it like it was something he wanted to touch but wouldn't. Not yet. And here's the real danger of being 50 years married. You forget how intoxicating the early stages of liking someone can be. When a shared smile feels like a secret. When silence feels comfortable instead of awkward. When a man leaning forward slightly feels more electric than an actual kiss. But I reminded myself, slow, slow, slow. After lunch, he walked me back toward the lounge doors. We paused at the steps. I'm glad you're here, he said. I'm glad you're here too. He nodded, the ghost of a smile lifting the corner of his mouth. All right, slow. Slow, but my pulse had absolutely missed that memo. That evening, Sunhaven held its weekly Thursday mixer, a charmingly awkward event where residents consume cheese cubes and pretend to enjoy each other's company. Attendance is optional, but gossip attendance is mandatory, so naturally the room was packed. And that's where the trouble began. I walked in wearing a navy dress with white polka dots, classic, modest, nothing that said scandalous rain frolicker. I spotted Leo across the room. He was talking to Mr. Dorsey, a man's personality hovering somewhere between sleepy tortoise and confused but polite tree. Leo looked up, saw me, and smiled. And then it happened. A man I didn't know touched my arm and said, "So you're the lady who tamed a Ramirez storm." I blinked. "What?" "Word travels," he said, grinning. "Nice catch." I stood frozen in my perfectly modest dress, trying to process the fact that Sunhaven had turned my simplest emotional interaction into a full-blown desert romance legend. Before I could respond, Marjorie popped up like a malicious prairie dog. "Edith," she trilled, "glad you're here. We were just discussing how it's never too late for companionship." I narrowed my eyes. Were you discussing that, or was someone discussing that? "I don't spread rumors," she sniffed. "I circulate possibilities." This woman was on thin ice, and it wasn't even winter. I stepped aside, breathing slowly. Leo was already weaving through the crowd toward me, expression sharp with concern. "You okay?" he murmured. "Do I look okay?" "You look like you're about to bury someone in the desert." "I might," I said. "Tell me, do you own a shovel? A discreet one?" He smiled. Which helped and did not help at the same time. "I'm sorry," he said. "People see two people together and assume things. We weren't even together. We were fleeing precipitation. I know. And holding hands for safety. I know. And possibly balance. I was slippery." "Edith." A trumpet sounded. Sunhaven's events coordinator, a man whose enthusiasm could power a small city, was announcing ballroom dance night. "Dancing is strictly optional, but encouraged. Physical intimacy is good for longevity." Half the room laughed, half pretended not to be offended. Then he added, "Couples, step to the center." A spotlight turned on. My soul briefly left my body. Leo stood very still beside me. "We can leave," he whispered. "Yes, that's sensible. Let's leave. Leaving is dignified. Leave."
Henry didn't sleep well that night. Sleep, generally, was supposed to be simple. Lie down, count a few moral regrets, drift into unconsciousness, and wake up with a new complaint about your lower back. Instead, Henry drifted in and out of restless half-dreams where the shimmering distortion hovered above him like a patient librarian waiting for him to return an overdue secret. By sunrise, he felt as though he'd slept inside a washing machine on the gentle cycle. Mia, on the other hand, looked awake and disturbingly energized when she knocked on his door at 7 a.m. "You look alive," Henry said, sipping his coffee like it owed him money. "I drank 4 espressos, the large ones." Henry blinked. "You drank... that's enough caffeine to jumpstart a small tractor." "Exactly. Let's move." They set off toward town with one goal: figure out who the mysterious caller was, or at least shake loose a clue from someone who was terrible at lying. In small towns, that covered a wide target population. But before they reached the square, something halted them. People were gathered in tight clusters, murmuring with the nervous excitement of pigeons aware a storm is coming, but hoping it's only dramatic wind. The old radio shop had rolled its TV outside, broadcasting a news alert. Mia elbowed Henry. "Look." The headline read, "Unexplained lights over regional tri-county area. Authorities investigating." The footage showed the night sky, except it behaved more like a faulty eyelid. Flashes of pale blue flickered across the darkness, like the sky was blinking. Henry frowned. "That's right above us." Mia bit her lip. Either the universe is malfunctioning, or we are in the trailer for a very low-budget sci-fi film. Sheriff Dalton appeared near the TV, looking as nervous as a man who'd been asked to recite poetry in public. Henry approached him. "Sheriff, those lights, connected to what's happening near Miller's Bluff?" Dalton froze. He was not a man built for subtlety. He was built for managing lost dogs and occasionally refereeing disputes about property lines. The sweat forming at his temples betrayed him instantly. "I don't know anything about any bluff, and I definitely don't know anything about lights." Mia whispered, "He knows everything about both." Dalton cleared his throat. "Now, if you'll excuse me, I need to go, purchase bread." Then he hurried off in a direction that had never once led to bread. Henry turned to Mia. "We're not getting answers from him, not until he stops panicking." "Then we go to Plan B," Mia said. "Do we have a Plan B?" "Of course we do," she said confidently, then added, "We make one up as we go." They found themselves at Maggie Turner's house, local librarian, collector of town secrets, and the proud owner of 3 cats with judgmental expressions. Maggie believed in 2 things: the importance of literature and the fact that the government was always hiding something. She opened the door before they even knocked. "I knew you'd come," she said, ushering them inside with the urgency of a woman who has been waiting her whole life for people to finally take her conspiracy wall seriously. Her living room was a museum of clippings, maps, red string, and exactly 1 taxidermied raccoon wearing a monocle.
Mia whispered, "She's either genius or deeply unwell." "Why not both?" Henry whispered back. Maggie gestured to a large map on the wall. "The lights last night align perfectly with the disturbances recorded over the past 3 months, all centered around one place, Miller's Bluff." Henry felt a chill. "You've been tracking this?" "For years," she said. "Since I noticed the stars above that ridge don't always stay put. Sometimes they shift. Just a hair, enough for a sharp eye to notice." Mia inhaled sharply. "You think it's, what, a portal?" She shrugged. "Could be. Could also be a tear, a fold, a breach, or the universe stretching in places it shouldn't. The world is stranger than we admit." Henry rubbed his forehead. "There was something on the ridge, something like a shimmer." Maggie's eyes gleamed. "The sky blinks, the air bends, the ground hums, and now it reacts when you approach. Curious." "Curious how?" Mia asked. Maggie pointed at him. "You saw it when you were a kid, didn't you?" Henry blinked. His memory stirred like dust in sunlight. A flash of something from decades earlier, a shape on that same ridge, a ripple he'd dismissed as imagination. "I might have," Henry whispered. Maggie nodded, satisfied. "Then it's not random. It's connected to you." Henry's throat tightened. He expected many things: danger, weirdness, maybe even sci-fi nonsense, but not the universe singling him out like a shy kid tapping him on the shoulder. Mia touched him arm gently. "We'll figure it out." But Maggie wasn't done. "Last night," she said, lowering her voice, "the blink wasn't just light. It was a signal." "A signal from what?" Henry asked. Maggie leaned closer. "Not what, where." Before Henry could respond, a distant rumble shook the windows, low, resonant, as if the ridge itself had exhaled. Mia's eyes widened. "That came from Miller's Bluff." Maggie grabbed her coat. "Then we don't wait. Whatever is happening is accelerating." Henry nodded. "Let's go." The ground rumbled again, more insistent this time. Something had awakened, and it wasn't planning to wait patiently for them to catch up.
The morning we returned to Miller's Bluff was one of those thin, sharp mornings that felt like the world had skipped its usual softness and gone straight to the point. Dew clung to the grass like 1,000 tiny secrets. The air had that electric hum again, quiet but insistent, like the ridge was whispering to itself before anyone else woke up. Mia walked beside me, her boots crunching over the brittle stems. Maggie kept a brisk pace ahead, unfazed by the incline or the knowledge that we might be stepping into something the universe never intended us to understand before breakfast. Henry carried a weight in his shoulders I hadn't seen before. It wasn't just worry, it was recognition. As if this ridge wasn't a mystery at all, but an old problem finally catching up to him, and he'd run out of places to hide. From the moment we reached the clearing, the air changed. The shimmer wasn't subtle anymore. It pulsed, slow and steady, like a heartbeat made of light. It rose from the center of the clearing in a narrow column, widening at the top like a candle flame turned upside down. But that wasn't the strangest part. The strangest part was the figure standing beside it. A woman, my age, or maybe a little older, hair swept back, silver catching the light. She wore a long coat, dark and heavy, but somehow elegant. There was something about her posture, an ease of familiarity that made my stomach knot in a way I couldn't name. Mia whispered, "Someone beat us to it." But Henry didn't move, didn't breathe. His eyes were locked on the woman as though she had reached out and grabbed something inside him. Mia reached for his arm. "Henry, do you know her?" Henry's voice came out barely above a breath. "I thought she was dead." The woman stepped toward us with the self-assurance of someone who had waited a very long time for this moment. Not rushing, not surprised,
Not relieved, just steady, certain. "Henry," she said, and her voice carried across the clearing like a thread pulling taut. "It's been years." Henry stumbled back a step, his face pale, his jaw trembling. "Eleanor?" My throat tightened. Not Eleanor. Eleanor Whitmore. Henry's wife, Mia's mother, my sister. The woman who vanished 37 years ago. But this wasn't possible. Mia froze. "Mom?" Eleanor smiled gently, softly even. But there was something behind that smile that didn't reflect in her eyes. A distance, a strange pressure like she was balancing between worlds. "Mia," she said, "you grew up just like I imagined." Mia didn't move. Couldn't. Her breath hitched like she'd been punched. You died," she whispered. "They found your car at the bottom of the river. Dad said—" "He believed it," Eleanor said. "Everyone did. It was easier that way." Henry's hands shook. I wanted to take them, steady him, the way sisters do, but even I felt cemented to the ground. "Where have you been?" Henry asked, his voice cracking under the weight of years. "Why didn't you come home? Why didn't you tell me? Tell us?" Eleanor looked at the shimmer beside her. I couldn't. Not wouldn't. Couldn't. The distinction sliced something open inside me. Maggie stepped forward, eyes narrowed. The phenomenon is tied to her. I knew it. The disturbances, the blinking sky, she's the epicenter. Eleanor didn't acknowledge Maggie, as though she expected skepticism from exactly this type of person and had long since lost the energy for explanations. But I wasn't Maggie, and explanations were the only thing keeping my heart from caving in. "Eleanor," I said, my voice firm despite the tremor I felt inside, "you owe us the truth. All of it." Eleanor exhaled, slow, strained, and when she spoke again, her voice carried a weight that didn't belong to anyone I remembered. "The night I disappeared, I wasn't alone at the river. You saw something on this ridge when you were a boy, Henry. I saw it that night too. Except the shimmer wasn't dormant then. It was open. A gust of cold wind swept through the clearing, rustling the grass like a warning. I stepped through. Mia's knees buckled. She sank to the ground, her hand over her mouth. Henry moved toward her instinctively, but Eleanor raised her hand, calm, careful. "I'm not here to hurt her," she said softly. "I'm here because the doorway is closing, and if I'm going to tell you the truth, it has to be now." My skin prickled. The shimmer pulsed again behind her, brightening in a slow inhale of light. I wasn't alone for long after I crossed. There's another place, a world layered over ours like two pages stuck together. Sometimes when the conditions shift, the pages separate just enough for someone to slip through. "You expect us to believe that?" I said, though even as the words left my mouth, I knew belief had nothing to do with it. Reality was already bending around us in ways we couldn't deny. Eleanor looked at me, really looked at me, and for a moment I saw the sister I knew, the woman who stole my dresses and returned them smelling of her perfume, the woman who told me she wanted a life bigger than this town. "Eleanor," she said gently, "you've always believed in impossible things, just not the ones that happened to us." I swallowed hard. Henry's voice cracked as he spoke again. "Why didn't you come back? Why stay wherever you were?" Eleanor closed her eyes. "Time doesn't work the same way there. I walked through what felt like a night. By the time I realized something was wrong, months had passed here. By the time I found a way back, decades." The clearing went still. Silent. Heavy. Eleanor looked at Mia, her voice trembling for the first time. "You were only 6. I thought I'd be home by morning." Mia stared at her mother with a mixture of wonder and heartbreak. "I missed you every day. Dad kept waiting for years." A shadow passed over Eleanor's expression, the kind that comes only from knowing your absence-carved wounds you can't ever patch. "I saw him," she whispered, "across the divide. Once. I tried to reach him, but the doorway snapped shut." "You saw me," Henry whispered, breath shaking. "When?" Eleanor's voice cracked. "The night you collapsed near this ridge. I heard your voice through the split. You were calling for me." The ground trembled, subtle, but enough to make the grass quiver. Maggie spun toward the shimmering column. "It's destabilizing." Eleanor nodded. "It's dying." Mia stood slowly, wiping tears from her cheek. "If you go back in, will we ever see you again?" She hesitated. It was the kind of hesitation that breaks hearts. "If I step back through, no." Henry's voice dropped to a whisper. "Then don't." Eleanor turned toward him, tears welling at last. "If I collapse while I'm here, the consequences won't fall on me alone. The rift will rupture, spread. The world wasn't meant to sit open like this." Maggie paled. "A cascade fracture?" "How catastrophic?" I asked. Maggie swallowed. "Imagine a zipper between two universes getting pulled down too far and the teeth refusing to close again." "Meaning?" Mia whispered. Maggie's voice shook. "Meaning our world would bleed into the other until neither one survives." The sky flickered overhead, one long blink of pale blue light. Eleanor stepped closer to us. "I'm coming to say goodbye properly. Something I didn't get to do the last time." Mia shook her head violently. No, you don't get to leave again. You don't get to choose another world over your family." Eleanor cupped Mia's cheek. "I'm choosing your future. All of ours." Henry couldn't speak. He stood there empty and full at once, as though losing her again was a wound reopening exactly where it had scarred. I stepped forward, my chest burning. "Eleanor," I whispered, "you come back to us. You stay. We build a new life, even if it's messy, even if we have to explain to half the town why you look better at 65 than you did at 30. A tear slid down her cheek. "Eleanor, I wish I could." The ground trembled again, harder this time. The shimmer flared open like a great eye widening. Eleanor backed toward it, the light framing her silhouette. Mia reached out, desperate. "Mom, please." She placed her palm against Mia's, separated only by the thinnest thread of air. "I love you," she whispered. Henry choked on a sob. "Don't go." Eleanor looked at him, and it was the look of a woman who'd loved deeply, fiercely, and never stopped. "She never wanted to, but if I don't, none of you will have a world left to live in." Another flicker tore across the sky. Maggie shouted, "It has to be now." Eleanor backward into the light, the shimmer folded around her like water closing over a stone. Her face softened, not with fear, but with acceptance. "Goodbye," she breathed. And then she was gone. The light snapped shut with a flash that burned white against my vision. The earth went quiet. The sky stopped blinking. The air went still. For a long moment, none of us spoke. The clearing felt emptied in a way no silence had ever felt before. Mia crumpled into Henry's arms. He held her tightly, shaking as though his body hadn't